8 Eternally Yours, The Vampire Duke by Dancia. Prologue. Under the grey sky, heavy with the promise of rain, I stood before the massive gates of Valtier Mansion, a place I'd only ever heard of in whispers and stories passed around the village. The gates loomed tall, like steel giants guarding the castle-like mansion behind them. Its walls, adorned with intricate Gothic carvings, sent a chill down my spine. It felt as though I was standing on the threshold of another world. Clutching my small bag tightly, I whispered to myself,
"You can do this, Lana."
The night before, I had packed my belongings, ready to leave the little village I'd called home my entire life. Willowmere Village, the night before.
Cassius Valtier? He's not just a duke.
My father's voice echoed in my mind. His anxious expression that night replayed vividly, as though he'd been staring at me not as his daughter but as someone marching to war.
He's infamous for strange things, Lana. That mansion is no place for anyone to stay.
I had only stared at the fire, which was dying in the hearth.
"Father,"
I said softly, my voice trembling.
"we don't have a choice. Aunt Rosa managed to live there for years until her final days. I can do the same. But Rosa never came back, not once, even though she kept sending money."
He argued, shaking his head firmly.
"You know this, Lana. Even the rumors about Duke Valtier are enough to keep people away. They say he hardly ever steps out. Some even claim he's a mons. Even if he's a monster, I'll go."
I interrupted sharply, meeting his gaze with unwavering resolve.
"I'm doing this for Lila and Aztalan. I want them to have a better future. That won't happen if I just stay here."
He said no more. In the silence that followed, he lowered his head, resigning himself to my decision. If I couldn't return, at least I could send money for my father and siblings, just as Aunt Rosa had done. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Arriving at Valtier Mansion. When the mansion's massive doors opened, a gust of cold air greeted me, making me shiver. The long, dark corridor ahead was lit by tall candles, their flickering flames casting shadows that danced on the stone walls. An older man with a stern face greeted me without so much as a smile.
"You Lana?"
He asked, his raspy voice sounding like stones grinding together.
"Yes."
I replied, my voice trembling with nerves.
"I'm Rosa's niece. I've come to take her place."
Without another word, the man, who introduced himself as Mr. Alban, led me through the silent corridors. I couldn't help but glance around as we walked. The mansion's interior was as grand as it was eerie, vaulted ceilings with intricate carvings, enormous mirrors framed in gold, and countless portraits of the Valtier family lining the walls. Their eyes seemed to follow me.
"This mansion is magnificent."
I murmured, more to myself than to him.
"Magnificence often hides darkness."
Alban replied without turning back. I swallowed hard, trying to calm the sudden wave of fear washing over me. After what felt like an eternity, Alban stopped in front of a room he called the music room. As I stepped inside, my eyes were immediately drawn to the figure standing near a grand window. The light from outside barely illuminated him, leaving only his silhouette visible. He was dressed impeccably in a black suit that fit him perfectly. His dark hair was neatly combed, and when he turned to face me, I was caught off guard by his eyes, silver, like molten metal, glowing faintly in the dim light.
"Your Grace, Miss Lana has arrived,"
Alban said with a bow. I couldn't move. Cassius Valtier, the Duke of Valtier. The man whose name I had heard countless times in fearful whispers. Seeing him in person was nothing like I had imagined. He didn't look like a monster, but he didn't seem entirely human either. It was as though he could see straight into my soul with a single glance.
"You're replacing Rosa."
His voice was deep, reverberating through the vast room. I nodded quickly, hoping my nervousness didn't show.
"Yes, Your Grace. I'm Rosa's niece. I promise to do my best."
He smiled faintly. It wasn't the kind of smile I had hoped for, neither warm nor reassuring. It was more like the smile of someone who had just found a new toy.
We'll see.
The room fell silent again, and I stood there, frozen in place. In that moment, a foreboding feeling settled deep in my chest. It was as if I had walked into a trap, one I might never escape. Asterisk. Chapter 1. After a tense first encounter with Duke Cassius Valtier, Mr. Alban escorted me into the depths of the mansion. It felt as though I had stepped into another world, grand staircases draped in rich red carpets, walls adorned with gilded mirrors, and towering ceilings illuminated by glittering crystal chandeliers. The opulence of it all nearly took my breath away. My steps faltered as we reached a large, well-lit room. Standing at its center was a middle-aged woman with a stern expression. Her hair was meticulously pinned up, and her pristine black uniform with a white apron gave her an air of authority. Her sharp features and assessing eyes bore into me with an unsettling coldness. I shivered inwardly.
I am Madame Veronica.
She introduced herself without preamble, her voice crisp and commanding.
I am the head housekeeper here. Everything within this mansion falls under my supervision.
I dipped my head slightly in respect.
It's a pleasure to meet you, madam. My name is Lana. I know who you are.
She replied curtly, her tone devoid of warmth.
And I know your family background. I don't care why you're here, so long as you obey the rules and perform your duties flawlessly.
Her bluntness caught me off guard, but of course, she had every right to be strict. With a sharp gesture, Veronica motioned for me to follow her. She led me to a dedicated training room for new staff. Inside, a large blackboard covered with neatly written rules awaited working hours, speaking etiquette, even dress codes.
Pay close attention and memorize these.
She instructed, tapping the board with a finger.
The Valtier Mansion is unlike any other workplace. Here, confidentiality is everything. Whatever you see, hear, or experience must never leave these walls. Not even your family should know. Understand this clearly.
I nodded slowly.
I understand, madam. Good.
She said, though her piercing gaze remained unyielding.
And one more thing. Avoid any trouble with Duke Cassius Valtier. He is the head of this household and does not tolerate people getting too close to him. You might find him cold and arrogant, but he holds all the power here. If you make a mistake, you'll face the consequences directly.
My heart raced as memories of my brief encounter with the Duke flashed back. His icy smile and penetrating gaze left a lasting impression that was difficult to shake.
Other than the Duke,
Veronica continued.
You should also be mindful of Lord Rail, his personal aide. He often acts as an intermediary for matters involving the Duke. But don't be fooled, if the Duke disapproves of you, not even Lord Rail can help.
After her long and nerve-wracking briefing, I was handed a black and white maid's uniform and directed to a modest room in the western wing where the staff resided. As I made my way there, Veronica's warnings echoed in my mind.
Why does everyone seem so afraid of Duke Cassius Valtier?
I murmured to myself. The question lingered, a mix of fear and curiosity stirring inside me.
Lana.
I froze at the sound of Madame Veronica's voice behind me. Turning, I saw her watching me with a stern, almost foreboding expression.
Remember what I said. If you don't want to regret coming here, follow the mansion's rules and stay out of the Duke's way. He won't hesitate to crush anyone who dares cross him.
I nodded silently, lowering my head. Avoiding the Duke, she said. I knew that would be easier said than done. How could I avoid a man who had already made my heart race with just one look? Asterisk. After settling into my room, I decided to visit the kitchen and see if there was any work to do. But on my way there, I bumped into another man.
Hello, you Lana. Yes, sir.
I replied, keeping my tone polite.
I'm Lord Rail, the Duke's personal aide.
I had expected him to be as cold and intimidating as the Duke, but Lord Rail was nothing like I imagined. He was a young man with a warm smile, neat attire, and a welcoming demeanor.
Welcome, Lana.
He greeted me kindly, his smile easing some of my nervousness.
I've been informed of your arrival. Don't worry, I'll help you adjust to your responsibilities here. Thank you, my lord,
I said, trying to sound composed despite my nerves.
I'll do my best.
Lord Rail's friendliness gave me a brief sense of relief. However, that relief was short-lived. An hour later, I was assigned my first task, cleaning Duke Cassius Valtier's study. *****. The study was immense, exuding a sense of cold magnificence. Dark wooden walls loomed around me, and towering bookshelves brimmed with heavy tomes on business, power, and the Valtier family's history. A large desk dominated the center of the room, surrounded by luxurious chairs. It felt less like a workspace and more like a vault for untold secrets. Taking a steadying breath, I got to work, carefully wiping the desk. But before I could finish, the door swung open with a loud creak, making me jump. I turned swiftly, and there he was. Duke Cassius Valtier entered the room with confident, deliberate strides. Clad in a perfectly tailored black suit, his sharp features and silver eyes seemed to pierce through me, rendering me speechless.
Why, Your Grace?
My voice trembled, barely audible. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. He didn't respond. In fact, it seemed as if he hadn't even noticed me. With practiced ease, he began unbuttoning his jacket. I panicked as realization dawned.
Why, Your Grace?
I blurted out, my voice louder than intended. He paused momentarily, his expression unreadable as he glanced my way. Then, without a word, he resumed his actions.
Is there something I can assist you with, Your Grace?
I asked softly, striving to maintain professionalism even as I felt my cheeks flush. Finally, he spoke, his tone cold and detached.
Just focus on your task.
Without waiting for a response, he removed his jacket. Then his shirt. And then, he didn't stop. Piece by piece, he shed his clothing with an unhurried calm, leaving me rooted to the spot, unsure whether to flee or stay. My face burned, but my traitorous eyes couldn't help but glance at him. Every movement seemed to draw my attention, his lean, muscular frame a perfect blend of strength and elegance. The Duke remained indifferent, as though my presence were no more significant than a shadow. He strode toward the bathroom with the same unbothered grace, his fully unclothed figure disappearing from view. I stood there, motionless, my breath caught in my throat.
Good Lord.
I whispered to myself, utterly mortified. Despite my best efforts to focus on the desk, my mind couldn't shake the image of him. I scrubbed the surface vigorously, desperate to distract myself, but it was no use. The Duke had left the room, but the effect of his presence lingered. Alone with only my thoughts and a cleaning cloth in hand, I leaned against the desk, overwhelmed and confused, my heart racing wildly. Chapter 2. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I tried to close my eyes, the events of that afternoon replayed vividly in my mind. My cheeks burned, my chest tightened, and I could only toss and turn in frustration, muttering curses at myself. Why did I have to see that? And how dare he strip completely naked in front of a mere maid like me? I bit my pillow in exasperation, trying to erase the image of Duke Cassius Valtier standing completely bare before me. But my treacherous mind seemed determined to replay every humiliating second on an endless loop.
Why is this happening to me?
I groaned, covering my face with both hands. That night stretched endlessly, and my embarrassment refused to fade. ****. The following days, working at the mansion became increasingly unbearable. I carried on with my tasks, cleaning room after room, delivering meals, and trying desperately not to make any mistakes. But life had other plans for me. One day, As I was delivering food to the dining room, I nearly dropped the plates in my hands. I tripped over my own feet and barely managed to steady myself before tumbling to the floor. Though I saved the dishes, the noise was loud enough to draw the attention of the other maids. I could hear their whispers, loud enough for me to catch snippets.
She's Rosa's niece, so of course she got the job. If she'd had to pass the tests like we did, she wouldn't have made it. Clearly, she's not cut out for this.
My cheeks flushed, but I pretended not to hear them, pressing on with my work despite the weight of their words. That minor mishap was only the beginning. While cleaning the grand, opulent living room, I accidentally knocked over an antique vase. The crash of it shattering against the floor reverberated through the room like a damning announcement.
Oh no.
I gasped, immediately crouching to pick up the shards with trembling hands. The vase was utterly destroyed, beyond repair. The maids present in the room stared at me, some shaking their heads, others muttering under their breath.
She's so clumsy and useless. Just wait, it's only a matter of time before she's kicked out.
Their words stung like tiny thorns, but I couldn't spare the energy to respond. Instead, I swallowed my humiliation and carried on, blinking back tears. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. A few days later, I was assigned to serve dinner in the main dining hall, a responsibility I knew was critical. The head chef made it clear that the meal had to be delivered on time.
Hurry up.
The chef barked.
You've only got a few minutes.
I pushed the serving cart laden with dishes out of the kitchen. But once again, trouble found me. Several maids deliberately slowed their pace in front of me, blocking my way as I tried to maneuver the cart. By the time I reached the dining room, I was a few minutes late. When I approached the table, Duke Cassius was already seated, his piercing gaze locked on me. His raised brow said more than words ever could.
You're late.
He said flatly. There was no anger in his voice, but something about his tone sent chills down my spine.
I'm sorry, Your Grace. I
began to apologize, but he cut me off with a raised hand.
There's no need. I won't be having dinner tonight. Leave.
The weight of his disappointment crushed me, but his sharp glare froze any words of protest on my lips. I could only bow my head and leave, feeling utterly incompetent. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The next morning, I woke up extra early, determined to redeem myself. After showering and preparing for the day, I reached for my black and white maid's uniform. As I slipped it on, I immediately realized something was wrong. The dress was too tight, squeezing my body uncomfortably. Clearly, it wasn't my usual size. But I didn't have time to investigate who had swapped it, so I wore it anyway, praying no one would notice how it clung awkwardly to my figure. Walking through the corridor, I ran into Madame Veronica. Her expression shifted instantly.
Lana. What are you wearing?
She demanded, her sharp voice echoing through the hall and drawing everyone's attention.
I think my uniform was switched, madam.
Her eyes narrowed.
Excuses. Do you think this is a brothel? Dressing so inappropriately.
I tried to explain, but as I bowed to apologize, something far more mortifying happened. The buttons on my blouse popped off one by one, scattering across the floor with a loud clatter. I wished I could disappear. Around me, the whispers started again.
She must have done it on purpose. What maid would dress like that while working?
My eyes burned with unshed tears, but I forced myself not to cry. Madame Veronica threw me one last disdainful look before storming off, leaving me standing there, my face aflame with humiliation. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Lately, I'd begun to wonder if I was truly cut out for this job. Everything seemed to go wrong, as if the universe had conspired against me. But I resolved not to give up. I had to prove them all wrong. That evening, I was once again tasked with serving dinner in the main dining hall. When Duke Cassius requested more wine, I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I'd heard him correctly.
Is there a problem, Lana?
His voice was icy, devoid of emotion, yet it sent a shiver down my spine. He didn't need to raise his voice to make me feel small. I snapped out of my daze.
What would you like, Your Grace?
I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper.
Wine.
He said curtly, his eyes narrowing.
And don't make me wait.
I rushed to the cellar, my heart pounding as I searched frantically for the bottle he'd requested. After scouring the racks, I finally found the right one and hurried back to the dining hall, hoping to make up for my earlier mistake. But as I entered, his cold, calculating gaze was already on me. Cassius sat with an air of effortless dominance, his arms crossed over his chest. His expression was unreadable, but his disapproval was palpable.
You're too slow,
he said sharply, his tone more cutting than before.
I'm sorry, Your Grace.
I whispered, struggling to catch my breath. He studied me in silence, his piercing eyes seeming to strip away every layer of my defenses. I felt utterly exposed, every flaw laid bare under his scrutiny.
Is there anything else you require, Your Grace?
I asked hesitantly, hoping to salvage what little pride I had left. His gaze lingered on me for a moment before dropping to the wine I'd brought. His voice was low, almost a murmur, but it carried an unmistakable edge.
That uniform you're wearing,
he said slowly, making me freeze in place. Chapter 3. My heart pounded in my chest as I dropped to my knees in front of Cassius. I knew I had to act quickly, or I would truly lose this job.
I'm sorry, Duke,
I said hastily, my voice trembling. I couldn't bring myself to meet his eyes.
I'll have the uniform properly tailored tonight and wear it tomorrow. Please don't send me away. I really need this job.
I knelt there, staring at the floor, anxiety twisting my stomach. The silence in the room was suffocating. All I could hear was the steady rhythm of his breathing and the faint sound of his glass shifting against the desk. When I finally dared to glance up at him, Cassius was staring at me. His gaze was sharp, assessing, and cold. My breath hitched as he lowered his head slightly and took a leisurely sip of wine from his glass.
Lana,
he murmured softly, his voice low yet intimidating.
be mindful of your appearance. It can be distracting.
His words sent a jolt through me. My chest tightened as I glanced down and realized the safety pin I had used to fasten my ill-fitted dress had come undone. Panic surged through me as I grabbed both sides of my dress, trying desperately to cover the exposed area. Heat flooded my face, turning it crimson with embarrassment.
My apologies, Your Grace.
I whispered, my voice barely audible. I wanted nothing more than to vanish at that moment.
I'll fix this immediately and return once it's taken care of.
Clinging to what little composure I had left, I turned and exited the room as quickly as I could. I closed the door behind me with as much quiet as I could muster. Once outside, my legs gave out, and I leaned against the wall, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. But my heart continued to race uncontrollably.
Oh, God.
I whispered, clutching my chest in a futile attempt to calm the erratic beating. I had no idea how I would survive in this mansion, but one thing was clear, I had to be more careful from now on. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. My steps grew heavier as I made my way to the wine cellar. My body was exhausted after staying up all night tailoring my uniform, yet my duties couldn't be neglected. My eyelids felt heavier with each passing moment, and I had to fight to stay awake. The mansion's corridors seemed endless and eerily quiet, and the deeper I went, the more disoriented I became. Every door I passed looked identical, and my growing fatigue only made everything blur together. I realized with growing unease that I had wandered into a part of the mansion I'd never seen before.
This isn't where I need to be.
I muttered under my breath, trying to stay calm even as unease crept into my chest. I needed to retrace my steps, but every turn only led me deeper into unfamiliar territory. This section of the mansion felt different, dimmer, quieter, and laden with an inexplicable tension. I paused, trying to steady my breathing as unease gnawed at me. I knew I shouldn't be here without permission, but my curiosity prickled at the edge of my thoughts, tempting me to explore. That was when I noticed it, a hidden door partially obscured by neatly draped curtains. It wasn't particularly eye-catching, but something about it drew me in. Cautiously, I reached for the handle and pulled the door open. Cool air spilled out, and the dim glow of soft light illuminated the room beyond. From somewhere within, a piano's hauntingly beautiful melody floated through the air. I froze in place, captivated by the sound. The music was gentle yet profound, weaving its way into my very core. Compelled, I stepped further inside, following the mesmerizing tune. That's when I saw him. Seated in the center of the room was Cassius Valtier. He sat before the piano, dressed in casual yet impeccably tailored clothing, his eyes closed as his fingers glided effortlessly across the keys. Each note he played resonated with raw emotion, as though he was pouring his very soul into the music. I couldn't look away. In that moment, Cassius appeared entirely different, calmer, more serene, and deeply enigmatic. He seemed disconnected from the world, lost in the beauty of his own creation. Something about him pulled me in, a magnetism that made me forget, if only briefly, the fear and apprehension he usually inspired. But here, with the piano and music, he looked almost celestial. My heart raced. I knew I should leave, but the growing curiosity burning inside me rooted me in place. I took a step back, intending to slip away unnoticed. But as I moved, my foot caught on a chair, and the loud scrape echoed through the room. Cassius' fingers stilled, and his eyes snapped open. I panicked and spun on my heel to flee, but in my haste, my foot caught on the edge of the carpet. I stumbled and fell to the floor with a loud thud.
Ah!
I yelped, scrambling to get back to my feet, my face burning with embarrassment. Before I could fully rise, a deep, commanding voice cut through the tension behind me.
You've made quite the commotion, Lana.
I turned quickly, my eyes widening in alarm as I found Cassius standing just a few feet away. He had moved so silently, so swiftly, that it was as if he'd materialized from the shadows. His sharp smile curved into something dangerously amused, as if he was relishing my discomfort.
So?
He drawled, his voice low and taunting.
Did you like what you saw?
I froze, my body stiffening under the weight of his piercing gaze. My heart thundered in my chest.
I didn't mean to.
My voice faltered, my throat dry as sandpaper. Cassius stepped closer, his eyes scanning me with an intensity that made me feel as though he could see every hidden thought and secret I held. There was something unsettling in the way he looked at me, more than just curiosity, something deeper and far more unnerving.
No need to panic, Lana.
He said, his tone dripping with mock reassurance.
I won't bite, unless, of course, I decide to. But you should tread carefully next time,
I swallowed hard, trying to steady my nerves despite the storm of anxiety and unease swirling inside me.
I apologize, Your Grace. I didn't mean to disturb you.
I managed to say, my voice trembling. His brow arched, clearly unimpressed by my apology. His expression remained darkly amused, laced with an edge of danger.
This time, I'll let it slide.
He said lightly, though his words carried an underlying warning.
But next time, be more cautious. Not every place in this mansion is safe for someone like you.
I could only nod, my face burning with shame.
Of course, Your Grace. Thank you.
I whispered before turning and retreating from the room as quickly as I could. Asterisk. Chapter 4. Ever since that incident, I felt a surge of anxiety every time I encountered Cassius. The mere sight of him from a distance made my heart race uncontrollably, and without hesitation, I would change my direction to avoid crossing paths with him. Even while walking through the mansion's corridors, if I caught a glimpse of Cassius at the far end, I would quicken my pace or take a longer route just to steer clear of him. One day, Madame Veronica called for me.
Lana, please take these documents and deliver them to Duke Cassius.
She instructed. The tension I'd been carrying peaked at that moment. Madame Veronica had no idea how hard I'd been trying to avoid him, and there was no way I could tell her. I nodded reluctantly, trying to steady my breath.
Of course, madam.
I replied, forcing calmness into my voice despite the hammering of my heart. Gripping the documents tightly, I made my way down the corridor leading to Cassius' study. My palms grew clammy with each step, and the closer I got to the door, the heavier my legs felt. Stopping before it, I hesitated briefly, but the fear of Madame Veronica's reprimand pushed me to raise my hand and knock.
Wait a moment,
Came Cassius' cold, clipped voice from inside. I held my breath as the door creaked open, revealing him seated behind his desk, his piercing gaze locking onto mine. I stepped inside cautiously, praying I could leave as quickly as possible without causing any trouble.
I was instructed by Madame Veronica to deliver this to you.
I said softly, extending the documents without daring to meet his eyes. Cassius glanced at me briefly, his expression unreadable.
You again.
He muttered, his tone flat yet unsettling. I nodded quickly, eager to retreat.
Thank you, Your Grace. I'll take my leave.
I stammered, turning to leave before my nerves unraveled. But as I moved to exit, my trembling hand accidentally knocked over one of the glass figurines displayed on his desk. It fell with a horrifying crash, shattering into countless pieces on the floor. For a moment, I froze, my face draining of color.
Oh no.
I whispered in panic, dropping to my knees to gather the shards. In my haste, I didn't realize I'd cut my hand.
Oh?
Cassius' head snapped up at the sound, his face darkening with fury.
What have you done?
He bellowed, his voice reverberating through the room. Shaking, I bowed my head low.
I'm so sorry, Your Grace. It was an accident.
My words faltered under the weight of his anger. He strode toward me, his sharp gaze like a blade. But as his eyes fell on my bleeding hand, his rage wavered, replaced by something harder to read.
What happened to your hand?
He asked, his voice lower but still commanding. I glanced down at the crimson streaks on my skin, the sight amplifying my panic.
I didn't mean to, Duke Valtiers.
I stuttered, my voice trembling.
I'll clean this up right away. Please forgive me. Stop.
He ordered, the single word silencing me instantly. He crouched in front of me, sweeping the broken shards away with one swift motion.
Don't move.
He instructed firmly, his tone brooking no argument.
But I need to. I said, don't move.
His voice was colder now, though there was an undercurrent of something else, concern, perhaps. Without waiting for my response, he took my injured hand in his, inspecting it closely. I froze, my breath hitching.
Your Grace, there's no need. I can handle this myself.
I murmured faintly. He ignored me. Pulling out a handkerchief, he wrapped it gently around the cut.
Stop trying to fix everything alone. You're only making it worse. But enough.
He said sharply, his stormy grey eyes locking onto mine. His gaze, though still intense, now carried a layer of frustration mingled with something unspoken, something almost protective. My knees felt weak beneath his scrutiny.
I'm sorry.
I whispered, my voice cracking as tears threatened to fall. Cassius tightened his hold on my hand, his eyes briefly flickering to the blood dripping onto the floor. His touch, though firm, held an odd tenderness that left me confused and strangely unsettled.
Your Grace. Duke Valtiers.
I called out hesitantly, my voice wavering. He didn't answer. Instead, he leaned closer, his face mere inches from my injured hand. I flinched, startled, as his nose brushed against my skin, inhaling the scent of blood. Something primal flashed across his features, and a chilling realization gripped me. The rumors I'd overheard about him, the strange, reclusive habits, began to click into place. Could it be true? Could he be a vampire? Before I could process my thoughts, Cassius' grip on my hand tightened, and panic surged through me.
Duke Valtiers, what are you doing? Please let go.
I pleaded, tugging against his hold. His body went rigid, and he abruptly released me, shoving me away with enough force to send me sprawling to the floor.
Leave.
He barked, his voice sharp and unyielding. His breathing was uneven, his eyes dark and filled with something both terrifying and sorrowful.
You know what to do. Stay out of my sight.
I stared at him, a mix of shock and confusion flooding my chest.
But I only wanted to help. I thought. Get out.
He roared, the command final and absolute. Heart aching, I scrambled to my feet, bowing deeply before retreating.
I'm sorry, Your Grace. I truly didn't mean for this to happen.
I said, my voice trembling as I backed toward the door. Cassius turned his face away, as if he couldn't bear to look at me. I could feel the tension in the air, a volatile mix of guilt and something darker. Whatever struggle he was facing, it was growing harder for him to control. And I feared what might happen if he lost that control completely. As I stepped out of the room, I heard the heavy thud of his footsteps behind me, but I didn't dare turn around. One thought consumed my mind as I walked away: what is happening to Duke Valtiers? Chapter 5. I stood gripping the broom tightly, sweat trickling down my temple as exhaustion weighed heavily on me. I had been working non-stop since morning, and Cassius had shown no mercy, giving me no break, as if testing the limits of my patience.
The main hall isn't done yet, is it?
His cold voice echoed behind me. I bit my lip, swallowing the urge to snap back.
I'll finish it right away, Your Grace.
I replied weakly, moving toward the next room. The tasks seemed endless: washing dishes, organizing the library, and even meticulously cleaning Cassius' intimidating collection of antiques. No matter how much I accomplished, Cassius would appear out of nowhere, assigning me more work without a hint of sympathy. ****. The gallery. I stepped into a quiet, eerie room within the mansion. Its walls were adorned with old paintings framed in gold, each radiating an air of age and mystery. With my broom in hand, I began cleaning the corners, paying close attention to the intricate details. But something gnawed at the back of my mind.
This room.
I murmured, my eyes settling on a blank spot between two paintings.
It would look better with some flowers. Flowers.
A cold voice interrupted from behind. Startled, I nearly dropped the broom. Spinning around, I found Cassius standing in the doorway, his unreadable gaze fixed on me.
Why, Your Grace?
I stammered, caught off guard. I had no idea how long he had been standing there, overhearing my idle musings. Cassius approached slowly, his steps deliberate, exuding an aura of authority and quiet menace.
You certainly talk a lot.
He said flatly, his tone laced with a subtle hint of sarcasm.
I didn't mean anything by it, just idle thoughts.
I quickly explained, bowing my head in hopes he wouldn't make an issue of it. He raised an eyebrow but said nothing more. Instead, he brushed past me as though I were nothing more than a shadow.
Get back to work.
He ordered coldly, exiting the room. Relieved but uneasy, I exhaled deeply and turned back to the blank wall. There was something about this room that felt more significant than just a gallery. But I pushed the thought aside, forcing myself to focus on my duties. From a distance, I felt Cassius' gaze lingering on me throughout the day. I didn't know what was going through his mind, but I could sense he was watching, perhaps intrigued by my resilience. Or perhaps annoyed. Either way, I knew he would dismiss whatever thoughts he had and return to his far more important concerns. ****. The dining hall. I was arranging the last plate on the dining table, exhaustion evident in my every move. The endless hours of work had drained me completely. As I placed the final dish, a cheerful yet gentle voice called from the doorway.
Lana, you've been busy all day.
I turned to see Lord Rail, Cassius' assistant, who had just arrived for one of his routine visits. His warm smile felt like an oasis in the tense atmosphere of the mansion. I managed a faint smile in return, hiding my fatigue.
Good afternoon, my lord. Apologies, but I still have much to do.
Rail studied me for a moment before glancing at the fully set table.
You've worked hard enough. Join us for lunch.
He said kindly but firmly. I froze, the unexpected offer catching me off guard. Lord Rail was the only person in the mansion who treated me with kindness, in stark contrast to Cassius and the other staff. But sitting at the table, with Rail, and possibly Cassius, it sounded like a disaster waiting to happen.
I can't.
I stammered, shaking my head quickly.
I have to get back to work. His Grace wouldn't approve. Cassius doesn't care about that. He hardly eats at the table anyway.
Rail interrupted with a light chuckle. Before I could protest further, he approached and gently took my wrist.
Come on, just for a moment. You need to eat too. But
Rail's reassuring smile didn't waver as he led me toward the table. My steps were hesitant, my anxiety growing with each one. But before we could sit, a cold voice sliced through the air.
Let go of her, Rail.
We both turned to see Cassius standing in the doorway. His sharp, icy gaze was locked on Rail's hand, which still held my wrist. Rail released me immediately, though his easygoing smile remained.
Cassius, I was just inviting her to eat. She's been working tirelessly all day. She deserves a break.
Cassius stepped further into the room, his calm strides exuding tension. He ignored Rail's words, focusing his piercing gaze on me instead.
You?
He said coldly.
Who gave you permission to abandon your work?
I lowered my head, my voice barely above a whisper.
I didn't mean to, Your Grace. Lord Rail. Lord Rail has no authority here.
Cassius interrupted sharply. He turned to Rail with a pointed glare.
And I believe you know that.
Rail raised his hands in mock surrender.
Fine, fine. I was only trying to be polite. No need to be so dramatic, Cassius.
Cassius didn't respond. He simply cast one last glance at me before turning to leave.
Get back to work.
He ordered, his voice devoid of emotion. I nodded quickly, embarrassment and relief mingling within me. Rail sighed and offered me a small smile.
Are you all right?
I nodded again, this time more hesitantly.
I should return to my duties.
Rail shook his head, disappointment flickering in his eyes.
Don't push yourself too hard, okay?
But his words were easier said than done. With a heavy heart, I returned to my tasks, my mind still replaying the tension-filled moments in the dining hall. Asterisk. That evening, I found myself in Cassius' private library. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and the faint mustiness of old books, neatly arranged on towering shelves. Exhaustion weighed heavily on my body as I ran a cloth over the cold surface of a mahogany desk. My stomach churned with emptiness, a constant reminder that I hadn't eaten since midday. But I forced the hunger down. Work was more important. As I stretched to place a book on the highest shelf, my weary body betrayed me. My balance faltered, my hands trembled, and the stack of books I held tumbled to the floor in a loud, chaotic crash. I fell to my knees, staring at the mess in despair. A low, disdainful voice shattered the silence.
You're getting more incompetent by the day, aren't you?
I whipped around to see Cassius standing in the doorway, his hands buried casually in his pockets, his sharp gaze cutting through me.
What's next? Are you planning to injure yourself on purpose? I'm sorry.
I stammered, quickly scrambling to gather the scattered books, keeping my head bowed. Cassius strode closer, his every step laced with cold authority. His gaze never wavered as he surveyed the scene.
You can't even handle something this simple. Why are you even here?
I bit my lip, swallowing the lump in my throat. No matter what I said, it wouldn't be enough. With trembling hands, I clumsily stacked the books, fighting the sting of tears in my eyes. The quiet was suddenly broken by a sound I wished hadn't escaped, a faint rumble from my empty stomach. I froze, mortified. Cassius stopped mid-step, his sharp eyes narrowing as his lips curled in faint disbelief.
You haven't eaten since noon, have you?
I shook my head slowly, too embarrassed to speak. He let out a short, exasperated breath, almost like he was scolding himself.
So, you really wouldn't eat unless I told you to?
I nodded hesitantly, my cheeks burning with shame. He stared at me for a moment longer, his expression a strange mix of frustration and curiosity, before murmuring under his breath.
Foolish girl. Pardon?
I asked, confused and unsure if I'd misheard him. Cassius didn't reply. Instead, he knelt in front of me, his sudden closeness stealing the air from my lungs. His hand reached out, tilting my chin up with a deliberate yet surprisingly gentle touch. The coldness of his fingers sent a shiver down my spine as he lifted my face to meet his. His stormy eyes bore into mine, piercing through every defense I had.
Would you really do anything I commanded you to?
He asked, his voice low, carrying an edge that felt both like a challenge and a trap. My words caught in my throat. He didn't break eye contact, the intensity of his gaze making it impossible to breathe steadily. The weight of his question hung heavy in the air, binding me in a silence I couldn't escape. I couldn't answer, couldn't look away. It felt as though Cassius had wrapped an invisible